Most Toyota Turbo owners never see the failure coming. One day the car runs fine. The next, there is a knock, a cloud of smoke, and a repair bill that starts at $3,000 and climbs fast. After looking at turbo failures across thousands of Toyota engines, the same root cause keeps showing up. Not bad luck, not a factory defect. One tiny part gets ignored at every oil change, a part that costs less than $40. In this video, I am going to show you exactly what that part is, why it destroys turbos silently, and what you need to do right now to protect your engine. The 7th point alone has saved Toyota owners from failures they never even saw developing. Let's get into it. The turbo oil feed line banjo bolt filter screen. Buried where almost no one ever looks is a tiny mesh filter screen sitting inside the banjo bolt on the turbo oil feed line. The turbo oil feed line is the small, high-pressure line that runs from the engine's main oil supply directly to the turbocharger bearing housing. It connects to the turbocharger through a hollow bolt called a banjo bolt, and inside that bolt sits a cylindrical mesh screen roughly the size of your thumbnail. That screen is your turbocharger's last line of defense. Its only job is to catch any particles or debris traveling through the oil before they reach the turbo's internal bearings. Turbo bearings spin at anywhere from 100,000 to 200,000 revolutions per minute. At those speeds, even a fragment too small to see with the naked eye carries enough force to score a bearing journal and start a failure that will not show up for months. The problem is, that screen was never designed to go 100,000 miles without attention. Over time, it collects metallic particles, carbon deposits, and sludge. As it clogs, oil flow to the turbocharger restricts. The turbo starts running hotter. Bearings begin wearing faster than they should. The screen itself costs roughly $8 to $15, depending on the model. Yet most Toyota technicians never touch it unless the turbo has already failed. That one oversight is responsible for more Toyota turbo deaths than any other single cause. Why oil starvation is the #1 turbo killer on Toyota engines. To understand why this small screen matters so much, you have to understand what actually kills turbos. Heat and oil starvation. Those two things destroy more turbochargers than everything else combined. Toyota turbo engines, including the 8AR FTS found in the Lexus IS200T and RC200T, the 8NR FTS in the Corolla hatchback and CHR, and the 2GD FTV in the Hilux and Fortuner, all rely entirely on engine oil to lubricate and cool the turbocharger. There is no separate cooling loop. There is no secondary lubrication circuit. Just pressurized engine oil flowing through a small passage, doing two critical jobs at once, when that flow is even partially restricted. Bearing temperatures rise. The oil film that separates spinning metal from stationary metal begins to break down. Microscopic metal-to-metal contact begins. Metal transfers from bearing to journal. The shaft develops play. Compressor and turbine wheels start making contact with their housings, and eventually, the entire assembly fails. Oil analysis data from failed Toyota turbos consistently shows the same pattern. Elevated iron and aluminum particles in the oil were present thousands of miles before the turbo actually stopped working. The failure did not start the day the turbo died. It started the day the oil feed screen became restricted enough to reduce flow below the threshold the bearings needed to survive. The $40 solution that changes everything. So what exactly is the $40 solution? It is a combination of the banjo bolt filter screen and the copper crush washers that seal the banjo bolt connections on the turbo oil feed line. Here is why both matter together. The banjo bolt has two connection points, one where it attaches to the oil supply at the engine block, and one where it connects to the turbocharger housing itself. At each connection, a soft copper crush washer creates the seal that keeps pressurized oil from escaping. These washers are designed to be used exactly once. When the banjo bolt is torqued down, the copper deforms slightly and conforms perfectly to the mating surface. That deformation is the seal. When those washers are reused, which is standard practice at most shops that do not specifically know to replace them, the already crushed copper no longer conforms correctly. Under pressure, oil begins to seep past it. That seep may be slow enough that you never see a puddle under the car. But even a small loss of oil pressure at the turbo feed line is enough to reduce bearing lubrication below safe limits. A fresh screen and two new copper crush washers together cost between $25 and $40, depending on whether you buy OEM Toyota or quality aftermarket equivalents. That combination, serviced at every second oil change on a turbocharged Toyota, eliminates two of the three most common causes of restricted turbo oil supply. The total investment is less than the cost of a single restaurant meal. The failure it prevents costs $3,000 minimum. The turbo oil drain line, the side of the equation nobody talks about. Protecting oil flow into the turbo is only half the job. Oil also has to drain back out. After lubricating the turbocharger bearings, oil exits through the turbo oil drain line, also called the oil return line. This line runs from the bottom of the turbocharger center housing back down to the engine oil pan. Unlike the pressurized feed line, the drain line works entirely by gravity. That design makes it vulnerable in a way most people never consider. If the drain line develops even a partial restriction, oil backs up inside the turbocharger housing. Pressure builds in the center section. The seals inside the turbo, designed to prevent oil from entering the compressor and turbine housings, become overwhelmed. Oil begins migrating past those seals and burning inside the intake or exhaust. You will see blue-tinged smoke from the exhaust pipe and find oily deposits coating the inside of the intercooler hoses. Here is what makes this particularly frustrating for Toyota owners. The turbo is not consuming oil because its bearings are worn out. It is consuming oil because the drain line is not clearing fast enough. Shops replace the turbocharger, charge $3,000, and 6 months later, the same symptom returns because the drain line was never addressed. It is one of the most common repeat failures in Toyota turbo service history. Heat soak, the silent killer that costs nothing to prevent. Turbocharged Toyota engines face one risk that naturally aspirated engines never encounter: heat soak at shutdown. When you drive hard and shut the engine off immediately, the turbocharger is still spinning and still extremely hot. Oil circulation stops the moment the engine dies. The oil sitting inside the turbocharger bearing housing is no longer moving, no longer carrying heat away. It cooks. Over time, that cooked oil forms a carbon deposit called coking directly inside the bearing housing. Those coked deposits restrict oil flow to the bearings from the inside, completely separate from anything the banjo bolt screen is doing. Engineers at Toyota actually factor this into their design recommendations. A 2 to 3 minute idle after hard or extended driving allows the turbo to cool while oil keeps circulating, carrying heat away before it can carbonize. The temperature drop during that short idle is significant enough to prevent coking from forming at all. Many Toyota owners do not know this because naturally aspirated cars do not require it, and the owner's manual buries the recommendation. But for any Toyota running a turbocharger, a 2-minute cool-down idle is the single easiest free habit that extends turbo life by tens of thousands of miles. If you made it this far, then consider liking this video, giving it a thumbs up, and subscribing to my channel. This helps me bring you more honest car advice. The warning signs your turbo is already starving. Before total failure, a starving Toyota turbocharger almost always sends signals. Most drivers miss them because they don't know what to listen for. The first sign is a faint, high-pitched whine that rises and falls with engine RPM. A healthy turbo produces a smooth, barely audible whistle under boost. A whine that changes character, becomes rougher, or appears at idle when the turbo should not be spinning hard, is a bearing beginning to wear unevenly. On Toyota engines like the 8AR FTS and 8NR FTS, this sound often develops 10,000 to 20,000 miles before the bearing fails completely. That is a massive window of opportunity that almost every driver wastes. The second sign is a slight hesitation or lag at low RPM that wasn't there before. As bearing clearances open up from wear, the turbine shaft develops minor play. That play affects how precisely the turbocharger responds to exhaust gas pulses. The result is a small but noticeable delay in boost buildup. Most drivers assume this is a fueling issue or a sensor problem. It's almost always mechanical, and it's the bearing telling you it's running out of time. The third sign is oil consumption that appears between oil changes with no visible leaks anywhere under the car. If oil is disappearing on a turbocharged Toyota that previously held its level cleanly, internal turbo seal migration is the first place to investigate. Check the inside of the intake hose between the turbo compressor outlet and the intercooler. If there is an oily film coating the inside of that hose, the compressor side seal is already past the point of recovery. The turbo is not far behind. Catching any one of these signs early means the difference between a $40 service and a $3,000 replacement. The window is there. Most drivers just never look through it. Why most Toyota shops miss this completely. This is where the real frustration lives for Toyota owners. The banjo bolt filter screen is not part of any standard Toyota dealer service checklist. It does not appear on most independent shop maintenance schedules either. It sits in a location that requires deliberate attention to reach, and because it fails slowly rather than suddenly, there is no warning light, no fault code, and no customer complaint until the turbocharger itself is already destroyed. Shops replace the turbocharger, return the car, and consider the job complete. The screen that caused the failure is reinstalled exactly as it was found, sometimes clogged, sometimes with the same reused copper crush washers that were seeping oil before the failure. The cycle repeats. The customer pays again. Toyota turbo owners who understand this pattern break the cycle before it starts. They ask specifically about the banjo bolt screen at every oil service. They ask whether the copper crush washers on the turbo oil feed line were replaced. Those two questions, asked consistently, are the difference between a Toyota turbo that lasts and one that does not. The service interval that makes the $40 fix work. Knowing the screen exists is only useful if you address it at the right time. Catching it too late means the bearing damage has already started. The right interval is every second oil change, roughly every 10,000 miles on a standard Toyota synthetic oil schedule. At that interval, the screen has not had time to restrict flow severely enough to damage bearings, but it has had enough miles to accumulate the deposits that make inspection worthwhile. The copper crush washers on the turbo oil feed line banjo bolt should be replaced at the same time, every time, without exception. At every 30,000-mile interval, the turbocharger wastegate actuator operation deserves attention as well. A sticking wastegate causes the turbo to overbuild boost pressure beyond its design limit. That excess pressure forces the bearings to carry more load than Toyota engineers designed them to handle, accelerating wear in the exact same bearing journals that a restricted oil screen is already compromising. Two failure modes, both quiet, both progressive, both entirely preventable with a $40 service and the knowledge to ask for it. What $3,000 actually buys you if you ignore this? A Toyota turbocharger replacement is not a quick job. On most turbocharged Toyota and Lexus models, accessing the turbocharger requires removing significant amounts of exhaust heat shielding, the downpipe, and in some cases portions of the intake system. Labor alone on a Toyota 8AR FTS turbo replacement regularly runs between 6 and 10 hours at dealership rates. The replacement turbocharger itself, purchased as a genuine Toyota assembly, costs between $1,200 and $1,800, depending on the engine. Add labor, gaskets, and the related hardware that gets replaced during the job, and $3,000 is the floor, not the ceiling. And if the turbo failure resulted in debris entering the engine, which happens when a bearing collapses and sends metal through the oil system, the repair cost does not stop at the turbocharger. Engine bearings, oil pump inspection, and sometimes a full engine teardown get added to the bill. All of that, every dollar of it, prevented by a screen the size of your thumbnail and two copper washers that cost less than a fast food lunch. The Toyota turbocharger is one of the most reliable forced induction designs ever put into a production vehicle. It was built to last. It fails because of one overlooked maintenance step that almost nobody tells you about until the bill arrives. If you are enjoying this video, consider watching the next one where I am sharing the exact oil change steps that double the life of a Toyota turbo engine.